Amara sat quietly in the middle row of her new classroom, her fingers curled around the edges of her notebook as though she needed to anchor herself to something solid. It was only her second week at the new high school, and every day felt like she was walking into a storm without an umbrella. The storm was not the weather, but the whispers, the snickers, and the stares that followed her every step down the hall. She had moved from another state after her mother got a new job, leaving behind her old friends, her familiar streets, and the dojo where she trained almost every evening. Now she was just the new girl in a school where fitting in seemed nearly impossible. The room buzzed with laughter and chatter before class started, and Amara tried to disappear into the background, hoping the day would pass without incident. But that hope never lasted long. Behind her, a group of students in matching jackets, members of the football team, were whispering and laughing. They had noticed her the moment she walked in on her first day, and ever since then they seemed to make it their mission to single her out. Sometimes it was mocking her hairstyle, sometimes her voice, and sometimes just the way she walked. Amara had grown used to it, but today something different was about to happen. One of the boys, tall with a smug grin plastered on his face, stood up holding a large plastic container. The label on it made Amara's stomach drop. Bleach. The boy shook it dramatically like he was on stage, and his friends erupted in laughter. "You need some cleaning," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the entire classroom. His friends howled with laughter while a few others looked shocked but stayed silent, afraid to intervene. Amara froze. She felt the burn of humiliation in her chest before she felt anything else. The laughter, the eyes all on her, the cruel words, it was like time had slowed down. The boy tilted the container over her head, and in that moment she knew what was coming. The liquid splashed down, sharp and acrid, soaking into her carefully braided hair. She gasped as the harsh chemical smell filled her nose, stinging her scalp and making her eyes water. The classroom erupted into noise. Some students laughed harder, slapping desks and pointing fingers, while others looked away awkwardly, pretending they had not seen anything. Amara sat frozen, her knuckles white against her notebook, her face burning with a mixture of rage, shame, and disbelief. The bleach trickled down her braids, the smell overpowering, and she could hear the boy above her still laughing, basking in the attention he had gathered. Her heart pounded in her chest. Every instinct told her to scream, to fight back, to show them who she really was. But another voice, quieter but stronger, spoke inside her mind. The voice of her late father. Strength is not about striking first. Strength is about knowing when to hold back. So she did not move. She did not give them the satisfaction of an outburst. Instead, she clenched her fists beneath the desk, letting her anger settle deep inside like a coiled spring. She stood slowly, the bleach dripping, her face unreadable, and walked straight out of the classroom. Behind her, the sound of laughter echoed like a cruel soundtrack. But she kept walking, her back straight, her chin high. In the bathroom, she turned on the faucet and bent over the sink, trying desperately to wash the bleach from her hair. The water ran over her braids, but the smell lingered, and the strands felt damaged, brittle in her fingers. She bit her lip to keep from crying. Not here, not in front of anyone. If she cried, they would have won. Her reflection stared back at her from the mirror, strong brown eyes, a face etched with pain but also determination. Amara whispered to herself, "This isn't the end. They don't know who I am. Not yet." The truth was, no one in that school knew that Amara had been practicing karate since she was 6 years old. No one knew she had trained under some of the strictest instructors, or that she had won state championships. No one knew she had spent years mastering not just the art of fighting, but the art of discipline, patience, and control. To them, she was just the quiet new girl. To herself, she was a warrior in disguise. That night, as she sat on her bed, towel drying her hair, she thought about quitting school altogether. The humiliation felt unbearable, but then she remembered her father's lessons, the hours in the dojo where he had taught her to channel pain into power. "The world will not always be kind, Amara," he used to say, "but you must always remember who you are. Your strength does not come from what others think of you. It comes from within." Amara closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She imagined the bullies' laughter, the bleach dripping through her hair, the look of smug victory on their faces. Then she imagined something else. Herself standing tall, unshaken, unbroken, and stronger than ever. She made a vow that night. She would not let them define her. She would not let them take away her spirit. Tomorrow, she would walk back into that school, head held high, and she would keep walking until the world saw her not as a victim, but as the fighter she was. The bleach could stain her hair, but it could never stain her spirit. And deep down, Amara knew that one day those who laughed at her would come to see the truth, that she was not someone to be broken, but someone to be respected. The bathroom smelled faintly of bleach and soap, the echoes of running water bouncing off the tiled walls. Amara leaned against the sink, her shoulders trembling as drops of water slid down her braids. Her scalp still burned, her fingers raw from scrubbing. She wanted to cry, but she could not. Not here, not now. Crying in public had always felt like surrender, like handing over her dignity to the very people who wanted to break her. She gripped the sides of the sink and stared at her reflection. The mirror showed her red-rimmed eyes, her damp hair, and her clenched jaw. A voice inside whispered, "Why me?" But another stronger voice pushed back, "Why not me? I can carry this. I can survive this." For the rest of the school day, Amara walked the halls silently, her head tilted down, ignoring the whispers and the smirks. She wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the wall so no one would see her. Every step felt heavier than the last. By the time the final bell rang, she was drained, not just from the prank itself, but from holding herself together when she wanted to collapse. At home, her mother noticed immediately. "Amara, what happened?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Amara shook her head quickly. "Nothing, Mom, just a long day." Her mother studied her, worry in her eyes, but she did not push further. She knew her daughter well enough to understand that sometimes silence was a shield. Later that night, alone in her room, Amara finally let the tears flow. They came quietly, rolling down her cheeks and soaking into her pillow as she lay curled on her side.
She hated crying.
She hated feeling weak. But the truth was she was hurt, not just by the bleach, but by the laughter, the indifference of the classmates who watched and did nothing. That betrayal cut deeper than the prank itself. She whispered to herself in the dark, "I don't belong here. Maybe I never will." But then she remembered something. In the corner of her room sat her karate uniform, folded neatly, the black belt lying across it like a quiet reminder. She had spent years earning that belt. Every stripe on it represented hours of sweat, discipline, and resilience. She had faced opponents bigger, stronger, and faster than her, and she had never backed down. Why was she letting a group of bullies make her feel so small? Amara sat up, wiping her tears. She walked to the corner and picked up the belt, running her fingers over its surface. Her father's voice echoed in her memory again. "The world will test you in ways you cannot predict. But strength, real strength, is knowing you are bigger than the test." That night, she promised herself something. The bullies would not see her broken. The next time they laughed, she would not hide her face. The next time they mocked, she would not flinch. She was more than their words, more than their cruelty. The following morning, Amara woke up with swollen eyes from crying, but she moved with determination. She braided her hair tightly, even though some strands had been damaged by the bleach. She looked in the mirror and told herself, "Today, I walk tall." At school, the whispers started again as soon as she stepped into the hallway. Someone muttered, "There goes Bleach girl." Laughter followed, but this time Amara did not quicken her steps or look away. She kept walking, her posture straight, her eyes focused ahead. For a brief moment, the bullies faltered, as though surprised she was not reacting the way they expected. But the pain was still there, deep inside. Every word stung. Every laugh was a dagger. She kept her face calm, but when she was alone in the cafeteria corner, in the library aisle, in the empty hallway between classes, her throat tightened and her chest ached. She carried her tears silently, never letting them fall where others could see. Her teachers noticed she was quieter, but none of them asked why. The world often failed to see what was happening right in front of it. And Amara, like so many others who endured cruelty, learned to carry her battles privately. That week, she went to the dojo more often than usual. The moment she stepped onto the mat, she felt different. The dojo was her sanctuary, her safe place. Every punch she threw at the heavy bag, every kick that echoed through the room, carried pieces of her frustration and pain. Her instructor, a calm, stern man with years of experience, watched her carefully. "You're carrying something heavy, Amara," he said one evening after class. She froze, her fists still raised. "I'm fine," she replied quickly, but he shook his head. "You are strong, yes, But even the strongest feel pain. Do not confuse silence with strength. Strength is facing it. His words stuck with her long after she left. That night she stood under the shower, letting the hot water wash over her, and she realized something. Her tears were not a weakness. They were proof she cared, proof she was human. But what mattered was what she did after the tears. And so the silent tears began to change. They no longer felt like surrender, but like release, like letting out the pain so she could stand taller the next day. Each morning she woke with a little more steel in her spine, a little more determination in her step. The bullies still laughed. They still whispered. But inside, Amara was no longer breaking. She was building. Each cruel word was another weight added to the bar she was lifting, making her stronger. One afternoon, when the same group of bullies tried to block her path in the hallway, Amara looked straight at them, her eyes steady. "Move," she said firmly. Her voice did not tremble. For a second, they hesitated. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. She walked away, her heart pounding, but a smile tugging at her lips. The silent tears had done their work. They had cleansed her spirit, given her space to gather her strength. She was no longer just surviving, she was preparing. And deep down, Amara knew the day would come when the bullies would push too far, when they would expect her silence and get something else entirely. That day was not far away, and when it came, they would discover the truth she had carried all along, that beneath the quiet exterior was a fighter, a prodigy, someone who could not be broken. Amara's classmates thought they knew her. To them, she was the quiet black girl who kept her head down, sat in the middle rows, and rarely spoke unless a teacher called on her. They saw her as timid, maybe even weak, but what they could not see was the fire inside her, a fire that had been lit years before in a place where sweat, discipline, and respect shaped her into something far stronger than anyone could imagine. That place was the dojo. Amara had been only 6 years old when her father, Marcus, tied her first white belt around her waist. At the time, it had seemed too big for her tiny frame, but she remembered the pride in his eyes as he knelt and told her, "This belt is not about fighting. It is about learning who you are." Those words had stayed with her every step of the way. Her father had passed away when she was 10, but the lessons he had given her in the dojo lived on. Her mother kept her enrolled, knowing that karate was not just a sport for Amara, but a lifeline. The dojo became the one place where she could let her guard down and be fully herself. Every evening after school, she slipped out of her denim jacket, tied her belt, and stepped barefoot onto the mat. The moment her feet touched the floor, she felt different, calmer, stronger, more grounded. The outside world might laugh, but in here respect ruled. Everyone bowed before entering. Everyone treated each other as equals, and everyone understood that true strength meant controlling yourself before trying to control anyone else. The bullies at school saw only her silence, but silence in the dojo meant focus. Amara had sparred with boys taller than her, girls faster than her, and adults twice her size. She had taken hits, fallen hard on the mat, and gotten up again every single time. Each bruise, each ache was a badge of honor. Her sensei often told her, "A warrior is not measured by how many times she wins, but by how many times she gets back up." And Amara always got back up. At 13, she had entered her first state competition. Nervous and shaking at first, she had stepped into the ring with determination burning behind her eyes. She had lost her first match, won the next, and by the end of the day, placed third. It was not the medal that mattered most to her, but the realization that she could hold her ground, that she belonged. By the age of 15, she was no longer just competing. She was winning. By 16, she had earned the nickname the Prodigy among her peers. But in school, she kept that part of herself hidden. She did not boast, she did not show off. She knew that real strength did not need applause. Real strength was quiet, patient, waiting until it was needed. Still, the cruelty she faced at her new school was beginning to test her patience. The Bleach prank had left her scarred, not just her hair, but her spirit. Yet it also reminded her of why she trained. Karate was never about violence. It was about discipline, about choosing how to respond when life pushed you to your limits. One night after a particularly long day, Amara stayed late at the dojo. The lights were dim, the room quiet except for the sound of her breathing and the sharp thwack of her foot against the heavy bag. Each kick carried the weight of the laughter she endured at school. Each punch carried the sting of the words thrown at her like daggers. She was not just training her body. She was training her heart to endure. Her sensei walked in, arms folded, watching silently. When she finished her set, drenched in sweat, he asked softly, "Why do you fight so hard when no one is watching?" Amara hesitated, then admitted, "Because when they laugh at me, I feel like I'm nothing. But when I fight, I feel like I'm everything." The sensei nodded. "Then remember this. The fight is not for them. It's for you. You already know who you are. One day the world will see it too." That conversation stuck with her. She realized she had been waiting for others to recognize her strength, when in truth she did not need their recognition. What she needed was to live her truth, whether anyone applauded it or not. The very next day at school, when the bullies tried to whisper cruel names as she walked past, Amara did not speed up her pace or look down. She just kept walking, her steps steady, her eyes forward. Inside, she reminded herself of the countless hours of training, of the bruises she had endured and the battles she had already fought. Compared to that, their words were nothing more than noise. But noise can become unbearable if it's constant. And for weeks, the laughter followed her. The whispers multiplied and the stares grew heavier. It was like carrying a weight that never lifted. Still, she endured. She poured it all into her training, channeling the negativity into fuel. The more they pushed, the sharper her kicks became. The harsher their words, the more precise her strikes grew. One Friday afternoon, as she left the school building, she found herself cornered in the courtyard. The same group of bullies, smirking, laughing, looking for another show. One of them sneered, "What's wrong, Bleach girl? Scared?" Amara looked at them calmly, her face unreadable. She said nothing, but in her mind she repeated her father's words. Strength is not for revenge. Strength is for defense. She tightened her grip on her backpack and walked straight through them. They tried to shove her, to block her way, but she did not stumble. Her silence was not fear anymore, it was power. Behind her, she heard one of them mutter, "Why doesn't she ever fight back?" They had no idea. They had no clue that the girl they mocked had the ability to drop each of them in seconds if she chose to. They could not know that every step she took was a deliberate choice to control her strength instead of unleashing it. That night, as she trained once more, Amara smiled faintly. She realized the greatest strength she had was not her ability to fight, it was her ability to wait. She knew the day would come when the line would be crossed, when her patience would run out and when defense would become necessary. And when that moment arrived, the bullies would finally discover the truth she had been carrying in silence. She was not a victim. She was a prodigy, and the hidden strength they mocked would become the very force that humbled them. The sun was beginning to dip behind the tall buildings of the town as students streamed out of the school gates. Some laughed, some lingered in groups, and others hurried to catch buses home. Amara walked steadily, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her mind focused on the quiet sanctuary of her dojo. It had become her ritual. Finish school, survive the day, then head straight into the place where she felt most alive. But that afternoon felt different. She noticed the whispers before she even reached the courtyard. Laughter rippled from behind her, followed by the sound of footsteps closing in. She did not need to turn around to know who it was. The bullies. The same group who had dumped Bleach on her weeks earlier now trailed her like shadows. Their leader, a tall boy with a smirk that never seemed to leave his face, called out, "Hey, Bleach girl, where are you running off to?" His friends cackled, circling around to block her path. Amara stopped walking, her fingers tightening around the strap of her backpack. She felt her heartbeat quicken, but her face remained calm. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet theirs. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice steady. One of them laughed, nudging his friend. "We just want to hang out. Don't you know we like you? You're our entertainment." Another stepped forward, shoving her lightly on the shoulder. "You think you're too good for us now, huh? Walking around like you don't hear us." Amara's jaw clenched. She had promised herself she would not break, that she would not let their words drag her down. But the shove, the sneer, it was testing her patience more than ever. She remembered her father's voice. "Control first, Amara. Always control." So she stood tall, keeping her voice firm. "Move." The boys exchanged looks, surprised by the firmness in her tone. But instead of backing off, they laughed harder. "Or what?" One of them taunted. "You'll cry on us again? Maybe we should give you another wash." He grabbed her braid, yanking it hard enough to sting her scalp. For a second, anger surged so hot inside her chest that her body screamed to react. She pictured herself flipping him to the ground, showing him she was not the girl he thought she was. But she held back. She knew the time had to be right. She pulled her braid free and stared at him, her eyes sharp. "Don't touch me," she said quietly. Something in her voice made him hesitate, but pride would not let him show it. He shoved her harder this time, trying to provoke her. "What are you going to do about it?" Amara staggered back a step, then straightened immediately. She could hear laughter from nearby students, some watching with curiosity, others with pity, none with courage to step in. Her fists itched. Her legs were ready. She could feel every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. She had fought tougher opponents than these boys, trained harder than they could imagine, but still she waited. She remembered her sensei's words. A fight is not about proving yourself. It's about protecting yourself when there is no other choice. For now, she could walk away. For now, she could endure. She pushed through their circle, her step strong, her eyes unblinking. Behind her, they jeered and shouted insults, but she did not turn back. She walked until their voices faded into the background. That night at the dojo, she trained harder than ever. Every strike against the pad echoed with the sound of their laughter. Every kick against the bag carried the memory of their shove. Her classmates thought silence was weakness. They had no idea her silence was restraint. Her sensei noticed the fire in her movements. "You are preparing for something," he said quietly. Amara wiped the sweat from her brow, breathing heavily. "They don't stop," she admitted. "They keep pushing. They want me to break." Her sensei nodded slowly. "And you haven't." "No," she said firmly. "Then you are already winning," he replied. "But remember, Amara, when the moment comes, you will know. Defense is not about anger. It is about clarity." She carried those words with her, but deep inside she knew the truth. The moment was coming closer. Each day the bullies grew bolder, testing her boundaries, trying to drag her into their game. And each day she resisted, but no spring can stay coiled forever. The next encounter came sooner than she expected. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the air heavy with the scent of freshly cut grass from the school's football field. Amara was walking across the courtyard when the group appeared again, blocking her way with grins that promised trouble. One of them tossed her notebook to the ground, pages scattering in the breeze. Another shoved her backpack off her shoulder, sending it tumbling. The leader leaned in close, his breath hot with arrogance. "Come on, Bleach girl. Show us what you've got. We know you're dying to." This time something inside Amara shifted. She bent down slowly, gathering her scattered pages, her movements calm, deliberate. But when she stood, her eyes were different. Gone was the quiet endurance. In its place was something sharper, steel, unshakable and undeniable. "I told you once," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the noise. "Don't touch me again." The courtyard went silent. Students stopped what they were doing, sensing something in the air had changed. Even the bullies hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, as if to test her, the leader reached out and shoved her again. Harder this time, and in that instant Amara knew. The time had come. Her body reacted before her mind even had to think. Years of training flowed through her veins like instinct. She stepped aside smoothly, grabbed his wrist, and with a swift movement twisted it just enough to make him stumble. Gasps filled the courtyard. He lunged at her again, but this time she sidestepped with precision, her foot hooking behind his leg. He hit the ground with a thud that silenced even his friends. Amara stood tall, her stance strong, her breathing steady. She had not struck in anger. She had defended herself with control, with clarity. The bullies stared at her, shock painted across their faces. The students watching whispered in disbelief. And Amara? She simply adjusted her backpack, looked at them calmly, and said, "This was your choice, not mine." She walked away, leaving them speechless. For the first time since she had entered the school, she felt free. She had not just defended herself. She had shown them a glimpse of the truth she had carried in silence. The next encounter had changed everything. The next morning, the school was buzzing. Word of what had happened in the courtyard had spread like wildfire. Everyone was talking about the new girl who had stood her ground, about the way she had moved with speed and precision, about how the leader of the bullies had ended up on the ground while she had walked away untouched. Amara kept her head down as she walked through the halls, but she could feel the shift in the air. The laughter that usually followed her had quieted. Whispers replaced it. Some whispered with awe, others with curiosity. and a few with disbelief. But for the first time, no one dared to shove her as she walked by. She did not want fame. She did not want to be a spectacle. She only wanted peace, but peace rarely comes easily when others mistake kindness for weakness. That afternoon, as she left the building, the bullies confronted her again. Their pride had been wounded, and wounded pride is dangerous. The leader, nursing his bruised ego, refused to accept what had happened. His friends, egging him on, surrounded Amara once more. "You think you're tough?" He spat, his face red. "You think you embarrassed me in front of everyone? Do it again, I dare you." Amara's heart pounded, but her face remained calm. Around them, students began to gather. Some pulled out phones ready to record. Others leaned in with wide eyes, sensing that something unforgettable was about to happen. She looked at the boy squarely, her voice even. "I don't want to fight you, but if you force me, I will defend myself." Her words only enraged him further. He lunged at her, fists swinging wildly, and that was the moment Amara stopped holding back. Her body moved with a grace that seemed almost unreal. She sidestepped his punch, her hand catching his wrist with ease. In one smooth motion, she twisted, using his own momentum against him, and he stumbled forward with a cry of pain. Before he could recover, she pivoted and swept his legs from beneath him. He landed flat on his back, staring up at the sky in shock. Gasps erupted from the crowd. 2 more of his friends rushed at her, but Amara's training carried her through. She ducked low, her legs sweeping in a powerful arc that knocked one of them off balance. As the other swung, she blocked his arm, pivoted, and used her shoulder to throw him to the ground. Every move was sharp, controlled, and exact, just as she had practiced hundreds of times in the dojo. The courtyard was alive with shouts now. Some students cheered, others stared in stunned silence. Phones recorded every second. Amara stood in the center, breathing steadily, her stance strong but not aggressive. She did not look like a girl out for revenge. She looked like a warrior defending her ground. The leader scrambled to his feet, fury and humiliation written across his face. He charged again, but Amara met his eyes calmly, stepped aside, and caught his arm. She pinned him with a move so swift the crowd barely registered it before he was kneeling, trapped, his face twisted with frustration. And then, in that moment of silence, Amara spoke. "This is not a game. This is not about winning or losing. This is about respect, and I will not let you take mine away." Her words hung in the air like a blade. Slowly, she released him, stepping back with control. She bowed slightly, the way she had been taught in karate, before turning and walking away. The bullies did not follow. They could not. The crowd had seen everything. The laughter that once followed her had turned to awe, to respect, to disbelief. For the first time since she had entered that school, Amara was no longer invisible. She was undeniable. That night at the dojo, her sensei asked, "Did you use your strength wisely?" Amara thought back to the fight. She remembered the look of shock on their faces, the gasp of the crowd, the silence that followed. She nodded slowly. "I defended myself. Nothing more." Her sensei studied her carefully, then gave a single approving nod. "Good, then you understand. The fight is never about hurting, it is about teaching. You showed them who you are without destroying who they are. That is true mastery." The words filled Amara with pride, but also with humility. She knew she could have gone further. She could have unleashed every ounce of power she had, left them bruised and broken, but she had chosen restraint. She had chosen to control her strength, to use it not as a weapon but as a lesson. The next day at school, everything was different. Students who once whispered cruel jokes now whispered admiration. Some even approached her, asking if she could teach them how to defend themselves. Teachers who had looked the other way during her torment now saw her with new eyes, some even apologizing quietly for not stepping in sooner. The bullies avoided her, not because they feared her fists, but because they feared the truth she had revealed, that beneath the quiet exterior was a force stronger than they could ever hope to intimidate. Amara did not gloat. She did not boast. She walked the halls with the same steady calm she always had, but inside something had shifted. She no longer carried the weight of silent tears. She no longer felt like an outsider drowning in cruelty. She had claimed her respect not by demanding it, but by showing the world who she really was. And as the days passed, her story grew beyond the walls of her school. Videos of the courtyard encounter circulated online, spreading across social media. People who had never met her watched in awe as the quiet girl stood her ground against those who tried to break her. Some saw entertainment. Others saw inspiration. But Amara saw something else entirely. She saw a responsibility. If her story could inspire one person to stand taller, to endure, to find their own strength, then maybe everything she had suffered was not in vain. She began spending more time at the dojo, not just training but helping the younger kids. She showed them how to stand, how to block, how to stay calm even when someone bigger tried to push them down. She told them, "Your strength isn't about fighting. It's about knowing you don't have to fight to prove who you are." And slowly, Amara's identity transformed. No longer was she the new girl, the Bleach girl, the victim of cruel pranks. She was something greater. She was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that sometimes the strongest people are the ones no one sees coming. The bullies never poured bleach on her hair again. They never shoved her in the halls. They had learned their lesson, not just about her, but about the danger of underestimating someone who carries quiet strength. And Amara? She carried herself with the same grace and discipline as always. But now she carried something more. She carried the knowledge that she had faced cruelty, endured humiliation, shed silent tears, and risen above it all. She carried the truth that her father's lessons had not only made her strong, they had made her unbreakable. And most of all, she carried the power to remind others that no matter how cruel the world can be, no one can take away your dignity if you refuse to give it up. The air in the school felt different after that day in the courtyard. For weeks, Amara had walked through those same hallways feeling like an outsider, eyes following her, whispers biting at her heels, laughter echoing when she least expected it. But now when she stepped inside, the silence was heavier, charged with something new. People still looked at her, but the look had changed. It was no longer ridicule. It was something closer to awe. Amara noticed it first in the small ways. A group of students moved aside as she passed, making space instead of blocking her path. Two girls who had once giggled when the bullies mocked her now smiled faintly, almost nervously when she caught their eyes. Even teachers seemed to pause when she entered class, as though they now saw the quiet girl in the back row through a different lens. She had not asked for any of this. She had not fought for fame or recognition. She had only defended herself. But the truth was clear. The moment she revealed her strength, she stopped being invisible. At lunch, she sat in her usual corner, unpacking the simple sandwich her mother had made. Normally, she ate alone, listening to the chatter and laughter of other tables without joining in. But that day, two students approached her. One was a girl from her English class, shy and soft-spoken. "Hey, Amara," she said quietly, clutching her tray. Do you mind if we sit here?" Amara looked at her, surprised. "Sure," she said softly, sliding her bag to make room. The girl and her friend sat down, exchanging glances like they were nervous. After a moment, the friend blurted out, "We saw what you did in the courtyard." "That was amazing," Amara shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't mean to make a scene." "But you showed them," the girl said quickly. "You showed all of us that you don't have to take it. I've been bullied too, and watching you, it gave me courage." Her words settled deep in Amara's chest. She had never thought of herself as someone others could look up to. She had only wanted to survive. But maybe survival itself was a form of leadership. Over the next few days, more students spoke to her, some just to say hello, others to ask about karate, and a few to quietly thank her for standing up in a way they wished they could. She realized she had become a symbol, not because she had sought the role, but because she had lived it. The bullies, on the other hand, had changed entirely. They no longer blocked her path or mocked her in the halls. When she passed, they looked away, their pride still bruised. They whispered among themselves, but never again did they try to touch her or test her patience. She had shown them her strength, and in doing so, she had taken away their power over her. But respect is not only about fear. True respect comes when others see your heart, not just your strength. And Amara was about to learn that lesson too. One afternoon in gym class, while students were paired off for a simple game, one of the same bullies who had tormented her ended up on her team. The awkwardness was thick. He would not meet her eyes, fumbling with the ball like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. The old Amara might have ignored him, but now she made a choice. "Here," she said, tossing him the ball gently. "You're open. Take the shot." He looked stunned, as though he had expected her to humiliate him the way he had once done to her, but she didn't. He took the shot, scored, and for a brief second the awkwardness cracked. It was a small moment, but it carried weight. Amara was not interested in revenge. She understood something deeper now. When you have strength, the real victory lies not in crushing others, but in lifting them out of their ignorance. By the end of the week, whispers had spread again, but this time they were different. Students talked about her humility, about how she never bragged, about how she had shown mercy even when she could have done otherwise. Slowly, admiration began to replace fear. That Friday, her English teacher asked her to stay after class. "Amara," he said gently, "I want you to know, I should have spoken up sooner. I saw the way you were treated and I stayed silent. That was wrong. But what you did, you've changed this school in a way none of us could have imagined." Amara looked down, her fingers curling around her notebook. "I just defended myself," she murmured. The teacher shook his head. "No. You showed everyone what dignity looks like under pressure. You reminded us that silence doesn't mean weakness. Thank you." Walking home that day, Amara felt lighter. The world was still harsh. She knew bullying existed far beyond her school. That cruelty was not something she alone had suffered. But she also knew that resilience had a ripple effect. Her courage had become a spark for others. That evening, she arrived at the dojo to find a group of younger kids waiting eagerly. They had heard the stories, seen the videos online. One of the little girls, no more than 8 years old, looked up at Amara with wide eyes. "Can you show me how to be brave like you?" Amara knelt, smiling gently. "Bravery isn't about fighting," she said. "It's about standing tall even when people try to make you small." The girl nodded, her eyes shining. In that moment, Amara realized something powerful. Respect was not earned in the courtyard fight, it was earned in what came after. It was earned by showing restraint when she could have unleashed anger. It was earned by choosing dignity over revenge, and now it was earned by giving back, by helping others find their own courage. Over the next weeks, the school atmosphere began to change. It was not overnight, but slowly, students who had once laughed at cruelty now began to stand up against it. Inspired by Amara's example, they pushed back when bullies targeted someone else. Teachers, too, became more alert, no longer turning blind eyes. Amara watched these changes with quiet pride. She did not crave attention, but she was grateful that her struggle had planted seeds of change. She knew her father would have been proud. And at night, when she tied her belt at the dojo and bowed before stepping onto the mat, she understood more than ever what karate had taught her. That strength is not about fists or kicks. It is about character. It is about the choices you make when the world gives you the chance to hurt back. Amara chose respect, and in return, respect found her. The school year moved forward, but for Amara, life had shifted in ways she had never expected. The Bleach incident, once the most painful memory of her new school, no longer defined her. Instead, what defined her now was how she had responded, how she had endured, revealed her strength, and chosen respect over revenge. Everywhere she went, people treated her differently. Not with pity, not with mockery, but with something stronger, admiration. Some still whispered when she passed, but their whispers were no longer cruel. They carried words like brave, strong, and inspiring. Amara never let those words swell her pride too much, but she could not deny that they made her feel less alone. Her mother noticed it too. One evening, as they sat together over dinner, her mother reached across the table and touched her hand. "You've changed," she said softly. Amara blinked. "Changed how?" Her mother smiled. "You used to come home with shoulders heavy, eyes tired. Now even when you're quiet, there's something different about you. You carry yourself like you know who you are." Amara thought about that. She had not realized how much she had grown in such a short time, but maybe her mother was right. Maybe for the first time she truly did know who she was. The dojo remained her sanctuary, but even there things were different. The younger students began gathering around her, asking for tips, watching her with eager eyes. Her sensei, who rarely praised, began giving her more responsibility, asking her to demonstrate moves, to guide others, to teach the values of karate that went beyond the physical. One evening, while helping a younger boy who kept stumbling through his stances, she crouched to meet his eyes. "You're not doing it wrong," she told him. "You're just afraid of falling. Don't be afraid. Falling is how you learn to rise." The boy nodded, trying again with more confidence. Watching him, Amara felt something stir in her chest. It was not pride in her own strength, but pride in helping someone else find theirs. At school, her influence began to stretch further. The whispers about her spread online. Videos of her standing up to the bullies had been shared thousands of times. Messages poured in from people she did not even know, saying her courage gave them strength to face their own battles. One message from a girl in another state struck her deeply. "I was about to quit school because of how badly I was being bullied. Then I saw your video. If you can stand tall, so can I. Thank you." Amara read those words over and over, her throat tight with emotion. She had never thought her pain could help anyone else. But now she realized her story was not just her own. It belonged to every kid who had ever felt small, invisible, or broken. With this realization came responsibility. She could no longer think only about herself. She had to think about the bigger picture. When a teacher asked her to speak at an anti-bullying assembly, she hesitated at first. Public speaking was not her strength. She preferred silence, action over words. But then she thought of that girl's message and the many others who might need to hear her. She agreed. The day of the assembly, she stood nervously at the front of the auditorium. Hundreds of eyes watched her. For a moment, she felt like the same quiet girl who wanted nothing more than to blend into the background. But then she remembered the bleach, the laughter, the silent tears, and the strength she had found. She took a deep breath and spoke. "I was bullied," she began simply. "I was humiliated in front of all of you. Some of you laughed. Some of you stayed silent, and for a long time I thought I had no power, but I was wrong." The room was silent, every word sinking deep. "I learned that power doesn't come from hurting others. It comes from refusing to let them take away who you are. I'm not here to tell you to fight. I'm here to tell you that strength is about standing tall, even when the world tries to push you down. Every one of you has that strength. You just have to believe in it." When she finished, the applause was not just polite, it was thunderous. Students rose to their feet, clapping, cheering. For the first time, Amara felt truly seen, not as a victim, not even just as a fighter, but as a leader. From that day on, Amara became more than just a student. She became a role model. She started a self-defense club at school, teaching anyone who wanted to learn. Dozens signed up, not because they wanted to fight, but because they wanted to carry themselves with the same quiet confidence she had shown. Her bullies, humbled and silent now, never crossed her again. A few even apologized quietly, though Amara did not need their apologies to move on. She had already won, not against them, but against the part of herself that had once believed she was powerless. The real victory was not in the fight. The real victory was in the lesson. That dignity is not something others give you. It is something you protect, no matter how the world tries to strip it away. One evening, after a long practice at the dojo, Amara walked home under the fading orange sky. She thought of her father, the man who had first tied her white belt, who had taught her discipline, patience, and strength. She wished he could see her now, not because of the medals she had won or the bullies she had silenced, but because she had lived his lessons. She whispered into the breeze, "I'm still rising, Dad, just like you taught me." And in that moment, she knew the truth, the bleach, the pain, the tears, all of it had been part of a journey. A test she had been strong enough to pass. The bullies had wanted to break her. Instead, they had revealed her greatness. Her story was no longer just her own. It was a story for every child who felt small, every voice that had been silenced, every dream that had been mocked. It was proof that pain can be transformed into power, that cruelty can be met with resilience, and that the quietest person in the room can sometimes be the strongest. The bigger lesson was not about karate, or fighting, or even bullies. The bigger lesson was about humanity. It was about choosing respect over revenge, about standing tall when the world tries to bow you down, about understanding that strength comes not from fists but from heart. Amara walked forward, head held high, knowing this was only the beginning. Her story had just begun, but the lesson would echo far beyond her school, far beyond her town. It would echo in the lives of everyone who heard it and believed, even for a moment, that they too could rise. Because the truth was simple. Bullies may pour bleach, they may laugh, they may try to humiliate. But they cannot take away the light of someone who refuses to be dimmed, and Amara was proof of that light.